Hi everyone, I'm Dan from JazzComposersPresent.com, an online space where composers, musicians, and listeners come together to celebrate the music we love. I'm joined today by Christopher Zuar, composer, conductor, leader of the Christopher Zuar Orchestra, winner of the 24th annual Sammy Nestico Award and commissioned by the Airmen of Note, and the 7th annual commissioning prize from the ASCAP Foundation and Symphonic Jazz Orchestra. Christopher is here to show us an approach to orchestration.
Thank you, Dan. Today I would like to talk about the ways in which we can build rich musical landscapes through the processes of layering and construction. I'll briefly touch on topics of instrumentation, registration, color, weight, and density. And to demonstrate these ideas, I'll use the opening 24 bars of my composition entitled Simple Machines. Simple Machines is composed for a traditional jazz orchestra, 5 woodwinds, 8 brass, and rhythm section, with the addition of what I'm calling an Appalachian string band, consisting of violin, hammered dulcimer, mandolin, and frame drum. The woodwind section employs doubles in this passage: piccolo flute, alto flute, clarinet, and bass clarinet. The brass use a variety of mutes, and the piano doubles on a honky-tonk piano, also known as a tack piano or a parlor piano. Before we listen to the musical excerpt, let's quickly look at the 4-bar layering scheme shown here. This opening 24 bars consists of 3 main musical layers and their resulting constructions, all 4 bars in length. As you can see here, the piece begins with the piano. 4 bars later, it's joined by the bass and drums, and 4 bars after that, the hammered dulcimer and frame drum, so on and so forth. So it's really about a process of addition, adding orchestration, layering orchestration on what's come before it. It's also worth mentioning that each new group of orchestration enters on the last bar of the previous grouping. And so we're dealing with 4-bar phrases here. Each new group of orchestration enters on the 4th bar. And the reason for this is twofold. For one thing, it helps to break up the 4-bar symmetry that's inherent in the music. And also, it helps to stitch the seam of the newly entering orchestration by slightly obscuring its entrance. So here we have musical layer number 1, which is played by the honky-tonk piano. And as you just heard in the excerpt, it has a very unique sound, a very unique timbre. It's brighter, it's more percussive in attack, and it's slightly out of tune, which gives it its character. You can also see that the range of this musical layer is all within 1 octave, from D flat 3 to D flat 4. And I'll get into why that's important in a moment. Specifics about the music. It has an intricate quality to it, and almost it has an almost knitted aspect to it. The image that I had in my head while I was composing it was that of a loom, a device used to weave cloth and tapestry. You can also notice that there are multiple voices in the piano, which present many possibilities for construction, which we'll get to in a moment. Next slide, please. Here we have musical layer number 2. which is played by the hammered dulcimer. Another very unique and interesting timbre, bright and percussive. It's a stringed instrument that's played with two mallets. One side of the mallet is wood and the other side of the mallet is felted, which give two very different types of attacks and sounds. In the case of this excerpt, the hammered dulcimer is being played with the hard side of the mallet, giving it more of that harsh, bright attack. Again, it's intricate in its nature. It has this knitted quality to it. And once again, it's existing within one octave, right? So from D flat 4 to D flat 5. And one other thing to point out is that each string on the hammered dulcimer rings out because there is no dampening system on it. So to dampen a string, you have to dampen it with your hand. That'll also play into how we think about constructing this musical layer. Finally, our third musical layer, which is the main melodic layer, is played by the piccolo flute here. And you'll notice that the range of the piccolo flute, the register that is playing this line, is roughly 2 octaves above that of layer 2. And we'll also get into why that's important in just a moment. Here we have layer number 1 construction. Okay, so you'll see in the top stave, it's the layer with the honky-tonk piano. And below, I've decided to orchestrate this using 2 tenor trombones, a bass clarinet, and a bass trombone. And so essentially what's happening here is the composite of these 4 instrumental voices creates that of the honky-tonk piano. And I chose these specific instruments because of the weight and body that they add to the honky-tonk, which, as I mentioned, is brighter and thinner in timbre. These instruments also, this construction, I might say, adds a certain dimension and color to the line. You can go to the next page. It's just a continuation of the line. And you can see, as you match it up to the piano, how I might have extrapolated these individual lines from the first layer. Here we have layer number 2, construction number 1, which is played by the alto flute and the clarinet. And this is a construction of the hammered dulcimer line. And once again, you can see that the composite of those 2 lower voices creates that of the upper voice. And I had mentioned early that the sonic characteristics of the hammered dulcimer are bright and metallic when played with the wooden side of the mallets. And so what I tried to accentuate in the woodwinds is both the metallic quality coming from the alto flute and also the wood quality of the clarinet, not to mention that the register that they're currently playing in produces more of a mellow sound. And so that helps to round off the harsher edges of the hammered dulcimer. Here we have layer 2 of construction 2, again, the hammered dulcimer line. This time it's being played by 2 trumpets and a trombone. The trumpets are muted, one in Harmon mute, one in bucket mute, and the trombone is in a cup mute. And again, you can see this type of knitting effect that I've tried to create. An additional way to add some more color to the line. And so you can think of this construction number 2 also existing with construction number 1. And finally, we have layer number 3, which, as you'll notice, is a reinforcement and not a construction. So this is specifically a doubling, right, or a reinforcement of the piccolo line. And I had mentioned before that I would clarify why there was 2 octaves between layer 2 and layer 3. And the reason is because the doubling that happens in the mandolin and the violin occupies those 2 octaves. So the mandolin is 8 VB from the piccolo, and the violin is 2 octaves below the piccolo, playing a combination of doubling and harmonization. And you can also see that the mandolin and the piccolo share some similar timbral characteristics as well as attack. And so the violin here, which add some warmth and body helps to maybe curb some of that more piercing quality of the piccolo and the mandolin. You may be wondering why there are two constructions of layer number 2 and only one construction of layer number 1. And the answer is weight. 3 trombones, which make up the construction of layer 1, have significantly more weight than that of the alto flute and clarinet, which make up the construction of layer number 2. To balance the weight of these 2 layers, I decided to add the muted brass construction. And one last point I would like to make is just a commentary on the relationship between density and range. By the end of this 24 passage, the music is pretty dense, wouldn't you agree? Dense but not lacking clarity. This is a result of the clear stratification of registers each layer and construction exists within. Because each layer has its own space to exist, it never gets clouded by that of another. Thus, as density and orchestration increase, clarity of each individual instrument remains intact. So this is just one of many approaches that one can take when thinking about orchestration. One of the things that I like to remind myself when writing and when orchestrating is to try to let the music unfold and develop as naturally as possible. And so when I'm in the process of gathering all these ideas, I always try to remind myself to pace how the material is coming across. And so if I were to give some advice, it would be to not reveal all of your cards at once.
Thanks for watching today's mini lesson. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Drop any questions, comments, or suggestions for future videos in the comment section down below. To watch our full-length events and participate in live Q&As with our presenting artists, head over to jazzcomposerspresent.com. Thanks, and we'll see you next time.